talking about difficulties, whom of us don't have even one, right? We can even sometimes count them in a day. Obstacles, sometimes even before we wake up in the morning, there are some difficulties to face, to look up, to address some issues, obstacles to think of, resources to find to overcome them, right? I guess I never found one in my life that had no difficulty at all. Even if we go throughout, books, even the romances, the fiction books, there are difficulties over there. Talking about, how people use their resources, what they know, to overcome them. And we spiritists had a lot of examples that we can inspire ourselves. And I guess what we know in the Spiritism, what Spiritism teaches us, that obstacles, difficulties in life, suffering itself, they are not our enemies. They are not our adversaries. The difficulties, that's the first step that we address tonight, and we should keep in mind, the difficulties are not enemies of us, that we have to avoid them at all costs, and we as well don't have to get rid of them at all costs. What we have to do is to learn to draw out of the obstacles, draw out of the difficulties, the best of them, for us to grow, to get stronger. Because as we see, difficulties and obstacles, struggles, they are part of the human evolution. I would say part of nature itself. Part of nature itself. We go through, since the atoms, the matter itself, there are obstacles over there. There are difficulties to overcome because there is one law that allows it to happen, this law of progress. And progress is made out of obstacles, made of difficulties. In that way, we can't in any way be free of difficulties, of obstacles. Even the higher spirits, even Christ, I would say, has difficulties in different level, different understanding. We can literally go deeper into it. But he, at this moment, might be having difficulty to maybe find a place to govern a new galaxy, a new planet, learning, right? We never know, but that's for us to understand that not only us, just ordinary people, has difficulties. So we can't say to ourselves, oh, maybe Andrew Jackson Davis now, in higher realms, not facing difficulties. They are not privileged because they are still evolving. They're still learning, and for those who learn, there are all this. So in other words, let us face the difficulties, the obstacles as our friends. Let us not make them enemies. Otherwise, there will be two things to go: overcome the difficult itself and overcome the difficult of the difficult, which is to be the enemy, which makes it much easier to have only the difficult to learn from them. And talking about difficult as well, one thing that I learned, and if we go through the Gospels, through the Spiritist literature, is not to overcome the difficult itself that makes us better, that we learn, but how we overcome the struggles of life, the suffering of life, the obstacles of life. Because difficult and obstacle, even the evil doers that are doing now evil, for people they have difficulties. For the robbers, they are finding difficulties to find a way to sneak into the bank or rob or something else. For the killers, they are finding difficulty and obstacle to kill their prey, right? So difficulty itself are everywhere and for everyone. So for us, fortunately, the difficult is how to get better and how to overcome our difficulties in the best way for our benefit, for our betterness, to be better people, right? And to do that, we have to find the best way possible accordingly to the moral standards of the gospel, of Spiritism, and to be ethical as well to the laws that we accept in the Spiritism as well as in the gospel. Saying that, I remind always myself the story of Moses. You know, back Moses before Christ, which had brought the 10 Commandments. Everyone over here must have known him, right? At least in the Bible. Maybe you weren't there with the Hebrews when Moses, have led the people out of Egypt to the land of Canaan, right? To freedom that people from slavery, as the Bible tells us. Moses has helped that people to go out of Egypt to Israel. That people had served in slavery for 400 years in Egypt, and Moses had led them. For 40 years, according to the story, long time he had worked out. He had given himself to lead that people, to educate that people as he could. Imagine he had given his lifetime to help that people gain freedom. But the freedom that he had started with that people is not only the freedom of the slavery to the Egypt, which is the corporeal slavery or the mind slavery which the Egypt had over them, but the freedom of themselves, of their vices, which will be jealousy, vanity, all these that we are still today in some way under slavery. Some of us are truly under slavery of vanity, of ambition, excessive ambition, and so forth. We are still, like 4,000 years later, freeing ourselves out of that slavery to find, in a way, the symbolic land of Canaan, the freedom which is in our heart, is in us. That's why maybe Moses got 40 years walking around with that people, because the meaning of the land wasn't the land itself, but the land of the heart, which is we have to delve inside of ourselves. But there is one particular event which got all my attention from the whole story, because the story tells us that at the end of his life, he was about to reach the land of Canaan. He was in a mountain with the people, and they could see with their own eye the land out there. Just maybe a couple days to reach the land. The freedom, the total freedom, their land they were looking for 40 years, that they have dreamed about. Some people have lost their lives throughout the journey. But The story tells us that Moses himself never reached the land. Never reached the land. He saw the land, but he never put his foot in the land himself. And why? I mean, imagine Moses overcoming all the obstacles, difficult for 40 years, with all those rude people all the time, trying to teach them. Moses even had to use the laws of, eye by eye, teeth by teeth. If you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. Those kind of laws. And now he's about to reach his final obstacle. He couldn't. Why? The story tells us that a little before, Moses got very angry. Very angry. People were some days with no water at all to drink. And they were thirsty, very thirsty. And every time those people had some difficulty, lack of bread, lack of food, lack of water, they looked for Moses. Moses, what do we do? What God has for us. Tells us what God will tell us to do. And Moses were there. You should go to this place here and kick the stone and the water will come out. You should find bread in this place. All the time, Moses was giving them instructions where to find the food and the water and everything else. And in some way, Moses was getting really tired of that. Yes. Just imagine. Why don't you go and work, people? Find by yourself. That's my words. It's not there in the Bible, but it could. Imagine. So the Bible only tells us that he got angry with the people because they were demanding him. Imagine, they were about to reach the land. They were about, to gain the freedom. And they were putting the responsibility of dying of thirst in Moses. You are the responsible, you're God. Because you brought us out of slavery to die here right before we gain freedom. All those complain. Sometimes today we still hear around. And Moses really got angry. And if we read the story, every time that Moses heard an instruction from God, that wasn't God, but the Spirit telling him, as according to Spiritism, to try something, he literally believed in them. And in his first attempt, he would reach the miracle. It wasn't the miracle, but the way to find. Yeah, first time. First attempt he would reach. Finding bread, water, etc. But at that day, he was angry and he doubted. He evoked God to help him find water. But he wouldn't hear God at this time. And he got even angrier. And he evoked God again. Supposed to get his stick and kick the stone to come out of water. And he had doubt as well at this moment. And he got so angry that he stuck the stone, the big rock. Finally he got water for the people to quench their thirst. But it was 3 attempts. Never before he got 3 attempts. Never before he got so angry. Never before he doubted. He got the water and quenched the thirst of all his people. And he went to the mountain, to the top of the mountain that had around. And at night, observing the land of Canaan, he died on the mountain. I could imagine maybe if Moses hadn't been angry and doubtful of the God's promise to him, he would have stepped into the land with his people. Imagine has, your ideal about to be in your hand, and you in some way lose it. That's why what happens to us sometimes. We are through our journey, our objective to reach out something, right? Sometimes it's a degree in college. Sometimes it's helping somebody else. Sometimes it's an inner problem. Whatever we are trying to achieve. In many years we are trying. Everything is in your hand to us. But then we are about to get the hands on it. We just get angry. And we can lose, or at least in part, what we are trying to reach for so long. As Moses, he didn't lose all the things, but he could achieve more. He couldn't have put his foot in the land with his people and had the joy while incarnated with his people. But angry and doubt is one of the most difficulties that gives us obstacle to overcome the difficulties that we have in life. It's not the enemies. Angry is not enemy itself. But angry can be, a really difficult obstacle and can in some way be a block, stunning block in our way. Let us put in mind that every time that we're trying something, if anger comes about in our way, might be a good chance that we wouldn't achieve what we are trying to. And at least we wouldn't achieve it in wholly and in total. Because anger itself is something that in a way contaminates the success that we are trying to reach. So in my life, every time that I get angry in something, that it's sometimes very often, I confess to you that sometimes I get angry, I remind myself of Moses. And I see myself in the mountain looking for my final objective. Oh my God. Maybe we should let the anger goes about and doubt. Because what happens as well in our difficulties in life, whatever it is, doubt is something as well, a great obstacle for us. Because we doubt of ourselves, we doubt of God, we doubt of the spirits. And then as well is another obstacle for us to reach our goals in life. If we, in all realms of society, of our achievements, the great achievers that we know, because they're achievers that we never knew and we never know, but they are everywhere. But there are some that we know in all realms of society. In medicine, we have, since the beginning, in some way, they have to go through obstacles to reach their goals. And we have to keep in mind that we are immortal spirits, that we may not achieve the total goal now, but it's a process. Like in medicine, who could say that 4,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, we wouldn't know about anything about ourselves, and today we know about our physiology? Hippocrates never imagined that we could reach where he had today, but he started. He dug deep as he could, but he couldn't reach it all. And I'm sure he was satisfied in some way what he had achieved. And we still remember him back then. Galeno with the 4 billies, man, 100 years ago, it was still used sometimes in medicine. That is totally not true for physiology, but it was used for thousands and thousands of years, since Galeno. But was a help for us today, because they started.
What is that?
Galeno. Galeno is G-A...
Galileo.
No, Galeno. It's about medicine. The 4 billies are in our blood.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. I will explain it better. Do you know what's the 4 billies? Would to say that our blood, all the illnesses that we had was in our billies.
Oh, okay.
In our blood. For example, if I have a headache, back maybe 800 years before, we had to bleed ourselves. Take blood out of our body to cure ourselves, because it was supposed to be in our blood, in some ways in our blood, some illnesses. And then there was the yellow billies, the one other tree that I don't remember now, but it was a concept of the time. Every time that I had the illnesses, one of the billies that I had in my blood was the problem. And then sometimes was to bleed myself maybe almost to death. Take the blood out of my physiology. And was accepted in 18-something. But came William Harvey with the system of our body, discovering, how our blood works in our vein with the heartbeat in itself. And then it's always started different since William Harvey. And then Robert Koch with the bacteriologist, discovering the bacteria in our bodies in itself, etc. And then comes other scientists, and it was a building steps. None of them had given up, but they wouldn't reach all in one lifetime. No, not even today. We had it all in a lifetime. What we have in medicine now is a construction for thousands and thousands of years. Right? In religion as well, we had Moses. Even we had Christ, the perfect one. But we have others. St. Francis. We had Paul Tarsus in Christianity. In other religion, Buddha. All those people were complementing each other except for Christ. Christ is holy, total. But the other ones was complementing, bringing what Christ has brought. Telling us that except for Christ, we can't reach our goals in just a couple years on earth. Totally. Right? Because if we keep that in mind, depending on the goal that we're trying to reach, and then we get frustrated and we give it up. How can I be totally happy in one lifetime? With the earth like it is today, with the difficulties that I have today in my inner soul. It can't be. If I'm planning to be totally happy in this lifetime, and then I'll be in serious trouble later on, because I'll find out that it's not possible. It is possible to be happy totally, but not in this lifetime. Maybe next, maybe 3 from now. Doesn't matter how many but I can be happy as most as I want to be, not totally. I want to work on it, and whatever comes in happiness to me, I'm happy with it. And then I wouldn't get frustrated. But I remember another scientist here, which helps me a lot in overcoming obstacles and having goals in life. Not only in this lifetime, because we tend to have goals very short. I mean, for tomorrow, for 10 years, for 5 years. I never heard someone saying to have goals for next reincarnation. Plan, maybe. I remember Albert Einstein. They say, I consider sometimes he was a little bit indifferent to life itself, some parts of life, but it's my personal view. But they say that, when he was trying to discover in the theory of relativity, the physics, it's all in it, he has a deep goal on finding the answers. And he disregarded a lot of little things in his lifetime, even his own wife, his own kid. Yeah, that's what they say. That's what in biographers say sometimes. And this friend of him asking him, thank you, but I wouldn't drink it now. Question him, Albert, you should focus on finding a job for you. Because see, your wife is in need, your kid as well is in need. Why you keep all this big question in your head and don't take your mind about it and go for a small work that you could feed your family? And he said to him, I had a goal, a big goal, which is to hear God itself. Those little things, I don't care about. Well, I consider a little bit indifferent for his family, but I draw out a big lesson for us. Of course, the little things matter a lot for us. But as well, the big goal should be matter most. Because what we have around ourselves here is to reach the big goal. Right? Without the little things that we have around ourselves, our family, our center, our job, our body, our dressing, everything is a tool to reach the goal, the big goal for our souls. So we should ask ourselves, what is my biggest goal for my spirit? That my outermost and the end of everything is in there. And what I do here in everyday life is to help me reach that goal. Whatever I do here and the bottom here will be a little bit of a step to reach that goal. If I am in any way unsuccessful in one of the little things that I'm doing here, well, it was one of the things that wouldn't work to reach the big goal. But if I have, for example, a little thing here as a big goal, I don't have a bigger goal than that, and then it will be a frustration. It will be a frustration. Because if it doesn't work out really well as I planned, and then, oh my God, it's the end of life. Because it was the greater goal that I had. For example, if we'll be buying a beautiful car or a beautiful home, my greatest goal in life, and then if it wouldn't work well, and then there'll be a big frustration and suffering for us. But if I have a goal to better myself as most as I can to have a good family, educate my kids, and be happy. Be humble, be joyful. But to reach that, I had the goal as well to purchase a good home too. And that'll be good. Because if I don't reach as well and purchase my good home, that'll be good too. Because I had a greater goal than the home. The home will be the way for me to reach a greater goal. For Albert Einstein, he had focused only mostly in the greater goal. He had reached it. But he disregarded a little bit of in the background, which were his family a little bit, and his friends sometimes. Well, it was him, right? But for us, that we are not Albert Einstein, right? We could be the Albert Einstein of the Spirit, discovering ourselves. What is the divine ourselves? There was something that Christ has taught us that helps us to overcome the difficulties in life. That, which is, psychology, the self-help psychology they use a lot. But Christ was the first one to use, I think. Because Christ, he taught us affirmations. Affirmation was the greatest things to help us overcome the difficulties in our souls, whatever it is. Because before Christ, if we read the scriptures and other philosophers, they don't have like quotes, affirmation, telling us that, as Christ says, you are the light of the world. Right? I never heard someone before Christ telling that people were divine. You are the sons of God. You are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. Jesus has said a lot of affirmation for us, telling us that we are really, really somebody. We are, sons of God. Part of God. Sons of God. Not part of Him because God is separate in some way because He created us. But before Christ, we never heard about it. And after Christ, we can use it. Every time that we are down, thinking that the obstacle, the difficulties can't be overcome, that are bigger than ourselves. And then here, there is a greater goal. We are the light of the world, and then we don't have one greater goal. And then I'll say, I am in the light of the world. What's the matter if I'm not successful in this difficult now? Because that's the part for me to reach the light which is in me. What's the matter if for now I have a difficult relationship with somebody? That's a part of my journey to reach the outer goal, right? What's the matter if now at this moment I fail in something? There was one way that I learned that's not working well, right? That's the way we learn that we haven't done it correctly. When we deal as well with suffering and struggle in our life, we have to keep deep in mind that suffering is not enemies of the humankind. That we have to fight against suffering at all costs and get rid of it as something that really jeopardizing our happiness. And we should keep in mind as well that people that have difficulties, which is us all, and suffering is not the same as being unhappy. Because when we talk about suffering, it immediately comes to our senses unhappiness, sadness. It's like synonymous. No, it is not. There are plenty of people around the globe and had been and will be people that suffers that they are happy. Happier than some people that don't is not suffering as much. And we see, for example, in overcoming suffering and difficulties in Paralympics, right? All those disabled people, they are so optimistic, and some of them is truly, we see them smiling, they are happy at certain degree. And for thousands of people that are in the same situation, they are in depression, they are sad. What it means? It means it's not in the illnesses itself, it's not in the difficulties itself that lies our unhappiness, our insatisfaction. Our insatisfaction, our sadness, our unhappiness lies in our spirits, not in the exterior, not in our bodies. We see two persons with the same problem, physically I would say. One is smiling, one is in some way happy, the other is truly unhappy and sad. What it means? It means that is in the spirit. Otherwise, both will be the same, right? Let me see my time here. I got a lot of things still to say. I don't know. Still have more. Okay. But why? One is happy and other is not. Because one is having different perspective of the same thing. Maybe for one, being disabled is part of reaching a greater goal. For the other one, it's not a greater goal. I know, of course, saying something and in practice, in lifetime, in reality, somewhat difficult. But the way it works. I had a little bit of a problem in my vision deficit from my childhood, from my birth. And sometimes we need creativity to overcome, our difficulties. I can't see, small letters from long distance. I got to get really close to read books and so forth. And one thing that I always had problem, long before, was, taking buses. Since I can't drive because of my sight, I had to take buses. And in Brazil, the bus is really fast, right? They start coming and then you see them go. I always in the bus stop and the bus start coming. I couldn't read where the bus would go. I would sign for the bus driver to stop, and I would sign for all the buses that were passing by. It was the way that I found, to get my bus. But sometimes they would stop and I would ask the driver, this bus where the bus is going? The bus driver would say, oh, you don't know how to read, right? Just there. So, but sometimes I had taken the wrong buses to a different destination because I would read there, but I never got angry with it. I always find something that would work for me. And of course, it's not a big problem at all. But for those that have a big problem, they have tools to replace in some way, to cover that difficult for them. And then we have our creativity to do that. That's why we are people, co-creators with God. So in that way, in any disability that we may have, be in our body, as a visual deficit, or something of, organ of my body, might be something that we are may facing. God will give us something else to deal with that. Because God is backing us in any difficulties. That's we have to remind ourselves constantly, otherwise we would see ourselves alone. And that's the greatest problem that we may have to overcome any difficulty in life, is to see ourselves alone, abandoned, and to have only us. Is that moment that we are the weakest at all times. Is that when we feel that way. When we see ourselves that way. Because in reality, nobody in the universe is doing one little thing alone. There's always a human being helping you, a spirit helping you, God providing something for you, for us. So in that way, you're never alone. To say that we are alone facing an obstacle is to deny God itself. Is to deny God itself. And when we try, when we, keep believing, having trust in extra power, helping us, when we see ourselves weak, unable, we say, well, but I'm not alone. I have help. Like, I'm thinking to go to Mt Vernon when I finish here. And so, oh my God, how can I reach there? And I remember I have a train and it'll be easier. I'm not counting only in my legs. I'm counting with the train, the operator of the train in the Grand Central. It's like us. I'm facing an inner problem, for example, depression. Well, how can I overcome it? My God, I don't know how to. I don't have the power itself now to overcome it. But wait a minute. I'm counting only in me. I have God. And then, who is God? And then we going to revise our knowledge, our belief in God. Who is God? God, according to Spiritism, is the supreme intelligence of the universe that governs the universe, the creation, makes all and everything happens. And then, oh my God, I have in my disposal God. And then everything turns out to be different at the same moment. And then we find in the lessons behind everything that appears to us to be enemies of ourselves. And we should keep in mind that we are the travelers of the infinite, we could put it that way. We never can really assure to us how many millions of years that we have already, how many reincarnations we had gone through, right? And we are here. We never died, we never destroyed, right? Talking about suffering as well, I remind myself always some examples in times of Jesus. We have Mary Magdalene. She had a struggle of her life. But as according to the scriptures, even Brother X and Spiritism, she hadn't, until finding Jesus and later on, illnesses of her body. She was a perfect woman in the means of the body, the physique itself. She had, according to, to the scriptures and so forth, she was a beautiful woman. But she had a struggle of the soul, moral problem. And she had looked for Jesus. She gone to find Jesus to help her overcome her difficult, her struggle of her life. But if we go through the encounter with Jesus, Jesus never said to her as Jesus, has said to other people when they were ill. Jesus didn't say to Mary Magdalene, are cured. No, Jesus had said for her. But Jesus has said for the blind people, you can see now, you're cured. For the disabled one, walk up, you're cured, you're healed, you can go on now. Every person that presented a physical problem, Jesus healed them, healed their physical situation. And they would go their ways. For Mary Magdalene, Jesus had said that. It means to us that the problems of our souls can be resolved by ourselves and for different meanings, in different ways. After Mary Magdalene finding Jesus, she followed him over the next years of his, journey through the earth, bringing the good news. And she had learned a lot from his preachings. Everywhere that Jesus would go, she would go as well with the disciples, trying to learn the lessons. And after Jesus had passed away, she had joined with the group of lepers out of Israel to work with them for long years. She had been with the lepers, helping them, bringing the good news for them, teaching them the lessons of Christ for the lepers. By the end of her lifetime, according to Brother X in the book Good News, she got sick, contaminated by the leper, right? By leper. But Brother X as well brings us a very good detail on this. Brother X tells us that Mary Magdalene, when she discovered that she got contaminated by leprosy, she got illuminated. She got so happier than before. It was like she was waiting for that moment for decades with those leprosy people that she was helping. For that moment on, according to Brother Ox, she wasn't the same woman. She was happier, more content, more joyful. A few years later, she passed away, and Jesus, received her in the spiritual as according to Brother X. But what happened to her? Because for those of the same group, those people had leprosy for many years, longer than her. But for most of them, they were complaining. They were sad. They were maybe responsibilizing God. They would put their responsibility in somebody else. They were fighting. They were unhappy. I couldn't say all of them. But for Mary Magdalene, it was something that brought her joy. For those who wasn't joyful at all, was more than a punishment that they wouldn't deserve than anything else. What were different in her than in the others? Of course, she had cured her spirit with the gospel, with learning with Jesus throughout her lifetime. And the others wouldn't have done that yet. For her, reaching the teachings of Jesus, reaching Jesus himself, were a greater goal. And get leprosy was a meaning to getting there. But for those people, they wouldn't have their goal in Jesus at all. Their goal was just to live by on earth. Maybe get a job, maybe get rich, maybe get married, or maybe get a perfect body. But after she met Jesus, she wouldn't, be the same for her lifetime. And she achieved her cure, her overcoming of her illnesses, which were in her spirit, cost her decades of work, discipline with the people. She didn't achieve what she achieved in just 3 years or 2 years following Jesus. She didn't have to get leprosy in her body to achieve what she had achieved. It means that depending on the difficulty that we facing and the goal, because the goal that we have is not the difficulty itself. It's what it comes in our way to find that, right? I have a goal to get a degree in college. The degree in college is not the difficulty itself. The difficulties will be along the way: lack of money, lack of support, lack of intellectual, involvement. A lot of this, there will be the obstacles. There will be along the way, right? It's like, open the Spiritist Center is not really the difficulty itself. It's a lot of the things that come along over the years that will, be the difficult, will be the obstacles to reach the goal. But sometimes we mix it. Oh my God, I found that, reaching that goal is difficult. No. We never know how many difficulties we're going to find along the way. If we don't start working, we're never going to know, right? For example, with the group in Mt Vernon, the Mt Vernon Spiritist Center, where I go, but I never counted so many difficulties that we had along the way. I never expected, to tell you the truth, how many difficulties and obstacles we had along the way to maintaining the Spiritist Center, the people, and all that goes in maintaining a Spiritist Center. But if I had, in advance, counted all the difficulties that might happen along the way, this and that, I would never, with my friends and group, open the Spiritist Center. And I would have lost all the opportunities and the learning that I had, drawn out of the experience that I have with the Spiritist Center itself. And this serves as well as in all the branches that we walk through in our lifetime. We can't underestimate what it comes in our way, but at the same time we can't as well count the difficulties. It's just let it happen day by day. As well, of course, we can't be responsible, embrace everything that comes to us that we are able to do. That's why we in Spiritism counts a lot in self-discovery, learning our possibilities, learning what we already have. Because sometimes we have more than we think, more possibilities, more knowledge, more spirituality, and then we don't know it yet, or we don't want to know it. And sometimes we are not so advanced as we think. That happens all the time. And that when coming to the Spiritist Center in a stud group will help us find ourselves and finding our outermost goal, which we could say here, which is to find our, maybe putting this microphone here. Sorry, I don't know. Works. Can somebody help here? See? Overcome a difficult needs help. See? My outermost goal here tonight will be to maintain this microphone. It will be lost my work. But maintain this microphone here will be the way me to find in the uttermost goal wish to finish my talk. There's one passage in the gospel as well about the cure of a man which Jesus had done in his time. The scriptures tells us that there was a certain man near in the pond of Bethesda, lying in a bed. He was a disabled man. And Jesus came along and told him to, stand up and walk. You were cured. Stand up and walk and take your bed with you. Take your bed, stand up and walk. The message of Jesus was for him to carry on his bed, he was lying there in that bed for years until Jesus had come and cured him. One of the spirits that come, one of the spiritual friends of our center in our, mediumistic meeting, once questioned us why Jesus has asked that man to carry his bed with him. Because the other people that Jesus had cured, they were in bed, but, Jesus has said for others to carry something. But for that man, because he was cured at that moment, why he needed bed later on to carry his bed? Anyone here? Well, that was me as well when the Spirit questioned. Don't worry. Because the Spirit told us, because Jesus knew that later on he would get sick again. And he would need that bed. Because Jesus was curing his body. Jesus wasn't curing his spirit. And that's what we do in the Spiritual Center. We work here to heal our spirit. If we are here only, or in the hospital only to cure our body, what happens is we have to carry our bed. Because later on we get sick. Curing our body is a mean for us to reach a greater goal, which is to betterness of our spirit, to get us better ways to serve humankind, and by doing charity and so forth. And at the same time, he told me, Adriano, that spirit, what you should do here in the spirit, saying, you know what? You should bring a bed and put it here we have a little stage there in the spiritual center up there. You put a bed here next to the speaker. And then I thought, he was, let me think for a while. And I thought maybe this spirit, maybe he's not a real mentor. What I need a bed here in the spiritual center. We're not here to sleep. We're here to work. And he told me later on, a little bit, you know why, my son? It's because to remind the speaker that he's ill as well. He's infirm as everybody else that comes to the spiritual center. And so, okay, you're good. You got a point. So, everybody in some way is infirm. Even the doctors. We go into the doctor, they are infirm. They will, if they are not, they will be sick someday. And to think that because I'm a doctor or a speaker, I'm not facing the same difficulties and obstacles and difficulties as everybody else is to be really naive and to not knowing ourselves.